Hello and good day from Luthadale, ladies and gentlemen. My name is the Advocate, and today I'm an advocate for The Well of Ascension, a book review. So admittedly, this one took me a lot longer to get through than I originally anticipated, but I can say that I finally finished my first ever read through of The Well of Ascension. The Well of Ascension is the second book in the Mistborn Era One Trilogy written by Brandon Sanderson. A sequel to Mistborn The Final Empire, The Well of Ascension was released on August 21st, 2007, and I think I might have actually liked this book better than its predecessor. Now, I'm not saying that I didn't enjoy the first Mistborn book, but The Well of Ascension does serve as a good stepping stone for the foundation that Brandon built in The Final Empire. The story, the characters, and even the prose, I would say all those things are enhanced and even improved in The Well of Ascension when compared to its predecessor. So let's start by discussing some of the story elements presented within this book in a spoiler-free way, which ironically involves spoiling material from the first Mistborn book. So if you're not familiar with spoilers from Mistborn The Final Empire, then I kindly request that you click off this video because I'll be going full bore on spoilers from the first book. The Well of Ascension takes place approximately 1 year after the events of Mistborn The Final Empire. With the fall of the Lord Ruler in the previous book, the Ska of Luthadale have elected Ellen Venture as their king, and now we have this new regime that is trying to maintain the peace within the land. All the while, these factions that were previously loyal to the Lord Ruler want to do away with Ellen Venture and are very keen on starting a war with not only Ellen, but all the Ska that live within Luthadale. So unlike the first book, which took a little while to get going, The Well of Ascension starts us off right into the action, as without delving too deeply into spoilers, our favorite Mistborn protagonist, Ms. Vin herself, is caught in the middle of this big battle with this other Mistborn, and it is such a delight to read. As was evidenced in the first book, Brandon Sanderson is very good at writing a magic-infused action scene, and this book is no different. By having the first two chapters start with a bang, not only does it grab hold of our attention, but the reader is also engrossed in wanting to find out how much Vin has grown as a fighter, and also wanting to find out what other changes have occurred within this universe since we previously left off. And although not every chapter is this grandiose magic battle, and the story does inevitably slow down in the middle of the book, I will say that when the action does pop up, you feel like you're in the moment. Although the book is written from a limited third-person point of view, it often feels like it's written in first person when you're right into the thick of things, and it's such a rush to read. Now, although Brandon has honed his ability to write a very good action scene, it should bear mentioning that Brandon's actual writing style is nothing to write home about, pun intended. And that mainly comes down to Sanderson's rather utilitarian use of prose. Similar to his first book, The Final Empire, Sanderson has a limited descriptive storytelling style when it comes to telling the events of this book. Brandon is less interested in painting a poetic picture with his words and is more interested in just describing things how they are. There isn't any Patrick Rothfuss-style metering going on here, and it's a very streamlined way of writing fantasy. Now, personally, this simplistic writing style doesn't particularly bother me, as the actual events that take place within the story are interesting enough to carry the narrative on their own. However, the restrained use of adjectives to color the world does occasionally scream for a little extra detail. All this to say that if you read The Final Empire and weren't a fan of Brandon's writing then this book is not going to change your mind. Now, to be fair, there is a little bit more effort by Sanderson to better illustrate the world here when compared to the previous Mistborn book. But again, it's nothing to write home about, and it's maybe a 20% improvement at best. Although Brandon Sanderson is unapologetic about his fairly unattractive writing style, I did notice that when compared to the first Mistborn book, Brandon does add a little bit more color to certain scenes in The Well of Ascension. It's not a drastic descriptive leap, but Brandon does slightly flesh out more of the scenery. A perfect example of this is Sanderson's description of Keep Venture. Enormous rectangular stained glass windows reached to the ceiling along both walls of the huge room. Sazed was dwarfed by massive pillars that supported a small gallery that ran beneath the windows on either side of the chamber. Every bit of stone in the room seemed carved, every tile a part of one mosaic or another, every bit of glass colored to sparkle in the early evening sunlight.
Again, the prose in this book doesn't hit any Walt Whitman poetic highs, but it is slightly improved when looking at a one-to-one comparison of the very same scene in The Final Empire. The text gives us a clearer picture of what Brandon is trying to describe, even if the prose remains somewhat limited.
The limited use of prose permeates this entire book and is an acquired taste. If you as the reader find Sanderson's writing to be distracting enough to the point that it detracts from your reading experience, then I think you might find something more like Name of the Wind to be a better read for you than Mistborn. Now, something that is vastly improved in this book when compared to The Final Empire is the character development. Ellen and Vin received the lion's share of character development in The Well of Ascension, and it's so good to see. Ellen in particular in the first book I found to be a little bit one-dimensional, but lo and behold, he received quite a lot of build-up in this book, and it's fantastic to read through. Without delving too deeply into spoilers, Ellen has an interesting battle of wits with one of the villains in this book, and it's a treat to see how Ellen attempts to puzzle through this particular encounter. In the previous book, we were always told that Ellen is a smart young man who is a prodigy at philosophy, but to actually see him put that philosophy to practice out in the real world of the Central Dominance is fascinating to read about. Vin also goes through her own personal battles in this story that help to expand her character. Now, unlike Ellen, Vin actually did have some layers to her in the first book. However, here we see those layers being pulled back as our main character goes through a rather emotional story of pathos. This emotional journey hastened by the introduction of a new character named Zane, who essentially functions as Vin's foil. It's a rather affecting story, and I'm very glad for its inclusion, as it allows our character to essentially develop into a more fully realized character, rather than just kind of being this stoic, take no prisoners, apathetic Mistborn that she more or less was in the first book. And it's for the best, as ultimately the characters are the ones that drive the story here, more so than the actual world with which this story takes place. Going back to the story here, I actually found the plot of The Well of Ascension to be more fulfilling and a deeper story than I found Mistborn: The Final Empire to be. Now, that's not to say that I didn't like the plot of The Final Empire. However, that book can essentially just be boiled down to an Ocean's 11 scheme to take over the Lord Ruler's palace and kill the Lord Ruler. And yeah, sure, there's Vin and Kelsey are there in between to throw in some character to the story, but it's a more simplistic story. The Well of Ascension, on the other hand, is more of a political Cold War with multiple factions at play here. There's no kill the ultimate villain and claim your prize story. It's more of a here's different people from different camps who all want something, and they're each going to try to reach that something through their own personal unique ways. Additionally, the story marries these wartime mind game politics with the personal journeys of both Vin and Ellen, and in my opinion it results in a more satisfying read. Sanderson also plays with the mystery genre with a interesting story hook that pervades about 60% of the story here, and it's my favorite arc in the entire narrative, and we'll delve more into that in the spoiler section. Now, although I very much did enjoy my time with The Well of Ascension, I do have a couple of complaints. Nothing big, but there are things that I noticed and I think are worth mentioning. For one, despite the fact that this is a fantasy book, the world and lore with which the story takes place in is relatively small. A good 90% of the story is pretty much just the city of Luthadale and Luthadale only. Now, personally, I don't have a huge problem with this, as I think the characters do a sufficiently good enough job to carry the narrative on their shoulders that having this humongous world that encompasses so many different cities and so many different towns is essentially just miscellaneous gravy for this already very delicious meat and potatoes dish that we have in front of us. The other critique I have is the plentiful amount of POVs with which Sanderson uses to tell the story. Now again, I very much enjoyed reading the different factions that are at play here who are each trying to vie for the same goal. However, by allowing us to get into the head of some of these different POVs, Sanderson inadvertently ruins some of the mystery elements that are present within this book. Not the main mystery hook that I'm a fan of, but some of the smaller mysteries that I think would have been best left unanswered until either the very end of the book or the next book, The Hero of Ages. But those critiques aside, I really enjoyed this book, and I'm definitely very much looking forward to seeing how the characters that are present within develop in the following book. So I think now is as good a time as any to talk about some spoilers. So if you have not read The Well of Ascension, ladies and gentlemen, then I ask you to kindly click to the timestamps below to skip to the end of the video, because we're going to ruin some stuff you probably don't want ruined. You've been warned. Alright, show of hands. Who here had Orsier, or Tensoon as he's actually known, pegged down as a turncloak Khandra when the plot twist reveal took place? I can't believe it. When we were first introduced to the story hook of there being a turncloak Khandra within the good guy camp, my first thought was immediately, oh, it's Orsier. It's gotta be Orsier. He was acting rather mischievously, and he had a little bit of a mystery edge to him that I was for sure was him. But lo and behold, Sanderson does a very good job of providing misdirects, because as the story goes on, we receive more and more page time and development for our wolfhound trader that you begin to suspect that, okay, maybe it really isn't him.
Have you ever been beaten by a master who knows that no matter how hard he hits, you won't die? All he has to do is get you a new set of bones, and you'll be ready to serve again the next day. We are the ultimate servant. You can beat us to death in the morning, then have us serve you dinner that night. All the sadism, none of the cost.
But then, when the plot twist reveal happens, it's like, no, suckered you in, haha, that was all a misdirect. It was actually Orsier, who's actually Tensoon, who was working with Zane all along. I was like, dang it, Sanderson, you got me. Oh man, I don't mind that it got me. I'm actually glad that it got me. One of the things that I dislike about fantasy is that I've read so many fantasy books now that I'm able to catch on to a lot of the established tropes, and I'm able to kind of predict what's going to happen later on down the line. But no, this mystery really got me, and I gotta congratulate Sanderson on that. Good work. I did not see it coming, at least not when it finally happened. Even prior to the Tensoon plot twist, I consider the Khandra murder mystery angle to be the strongest part of the book. Personally, I find mystery to be a very alluring plot element in fantasy, as it engages the reader and asks the reader to become an active participant in the narrative. In The Well of Ascension, the reader can very easily self-insert themselves into Vin's shoes, as we also attempt to piece together what exactly is going on here and who the Turncloak is.
Vin looked down at the pile of bones, feeling a sickening sense of unease. There is a very good chance that someone in their core team, a member of Kelsier's former band, was now an imposter.
Now, writing a mystery is tough work, and Sanderson could have very easily screwed this up if he wasn't careful. He could have easily given us too many clues that we would have surely figured out the plot twist way before the actual reveal, thus making the read to the inevitable plot twist a slog. On the other hand, he could have given us too few clues to the point that the reveal would have made little sense, and we would be left scratching our heads. In the end, I think he gave us just enough breadcrumbs to make the reveal ultimately satisfying, and even gave us the added bonus of some very candid dialogue and character development for our favorite wolfhound. So much so that I think I know him way better than I ever did Orsier in the Final Empire. Now, on the topic of character development, I can't help but continue to be impressed by how much deeper and richer characterization we receive for both Vin and Ellen in this book. And I think the moment that best encapsulates this characterization is the moment when Vin and Ellen have this very personal conversation one day after Vin goes on this killing spree after having brutally slaughtered a lot of Set's soldiers, and Vin is left broken down and sort of ashamed of the actions she had committed, very much thanks to the temptations of Zane.
"It's not childish, Vin," Ellen said. "It was a good strategy. You gave our enemies a show of force. You frightened away one of our major opponents, and now my father will be even more afraid to attack. You've bought us more time. Bought it with the lives of hundreds of men. Enemy soldiers who marched into our city," Ellen said. "Men who were protecting a tyrant who oppresses his people." "That's the same rationale Kelsier used," Vin said quietly. "When he killed noblemen and their guards, he said they were upholding the final empire, so they deserved to die. He frightened me." Ellen didn't know what to say to that. "You're not like him," he wanted to say. It was true, but the words wouldn't come out. They rang hollow to him. Instead, he pulled Vin close, her shoulder up against his chest, head beneath his chin. "I wish I knew the right things to say, Vin," he whispered.
It's a personal moment of pathos that allows the reader to become better attached with both characters, as we see that Elend is much stronger than we originally gave him credit for, and Vin is a more human character than we originally gave her credit for. And now with the reveal that Elend has Mistborn-like capabilities, I'm very curious to see how the arcs of both characters will continue to develop in the following book, The Hero of Ages. So all in all, a combination of some deep characterization, a great mystery hook, and some fantastic magic action battles at the beginning, middle, and end of the story, I think put this book over the top for me, and I would say that I enjoyed The Will of Ascension a little bit more than I did Mistborn: The Final Empire. Yes, the prose is still rather standard, so if you didn't enjoy the prose of the first book, you're likely not going to enjoy the prose here, but ultimately, I think the positives outweigh the negatives, and besides a few minor quibbles that I have with regards to the lore of the world, I think ultimately The Well of Ascension is a very satisfying read-through, especially if you read Mistborn: The Final Empire and haven't gotten around to reading its sequel. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching one of my videos, guys. If you could do me a huge solid, guys, if you could give me a like, leave a comment down below and let me know your thoughts with regards to The Will of Ascension. I would love to have a conversation with you guys with regards to our potentially differing opinions with regards to this book and this Mistborn series in general. And also consider subscribing. I love doing these fantasy book reviews. I will continue to do them in the near future, and I look forward to seeing you guys there as well. My next video, predictably enough, will be a review on The Hero of Ages. It's the third and final book in the Mistborn Era One Trilogy, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing how this book concludes what has so far been a great series to read through. So thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen, and until we meet again, the Advocate